Hello and welcome to Byju's Exam Prep IAS. A very warm good morning to everyone. I hope all of you are doing good. I welcome you all to today's class. This is class number 8 of governance, second last class. Good morning. Today we'll be discussing a bit of detail about the political parties and mostly about the comparison of the constitution. Good morning, everyone. We'll wait for a couple of minutes and then we'll start the class after everyone joins in. Thank you so much. All right, then. Good morning once again, everyone. I hope all of you are doing good. It's a Monday. We are even closer to the prelims result. The prelims result may be out in, I think, a couple of days, maximum 3 days from now. So, all the very best for that as well if you are given this year's prelims examination. Today is module number 8, class number 8 of governance. We have two important topics for discussion today. First topic is mainly about the political parties. Now, about political parties, most of you would have already read in Indian polity. When you read Indian polity, you read about political parties in India. You mainly read about recognized parties, registered parties, how to form a political party, so on and so forth. So many of you already would have read this, but we'll revise that very quickly. Most of the class or most of the time of today's class will be spent on the topic which is called the comparison of constitution. In the comparison of the constitution, what exactly do? We will compare India's constitution, the main features of the Indian constitution, with some of the other major countries in the world. Now, it's very obvious that because we are from India, we are preparing for the Indian civil services. So we have read Indian constitution in a lot of detail. You don't have to read other countries' constitution in so much detail. What we'll do is we will just compare the important features of, for example, American Constitution, the British Constitution, French Constitution. We'll take up their important features and we'll try and compare that with that of the Indian Constitution, see how it works, and that is what the second part of today's class will be. So let's begin without any further delay. As I said, the first class will be about the political parties in India. Now, again, it's a topic that you see in Indian polity. It's a topic that you have seen in M. Lakshmikant book. Many of you would have already read about this as well. All of you know what political parties are. Political parties are those group of people having similar kind of an idea about India's future, similar kind of idea about India's development, and working together. They fight elections, they want to come to power, and that is how they want to rule over the entire country. That is how the political parties are. Now, please remember each and everything about political parties in India. For example, registering the political parties in India, giving them the symbol, making sure that they follow rules and regulations. Everything about political parties in India is handled by the Election Commission of India. So, Election Commission of India is responsible for each and everything with regards to political parties, making sure that they follow the rules, making sure that they register themselves. If there are any disputes about political parties, disputes such as, let's say, some people in the party want to break up, they want to have a new party, they want to take that symbol. All that is decided by the Election Commission of India, which is the constitutional authority which looks into conducting elections in India. Now, if you look around the world, there are different types of party systems that exist. First, there is something called the one party system. One party system means a system where only one party can exist in the country. For example, China. So, if you look at China, there is only one political party in China, which is called the Communist Party of China or the Chinese Communist Party. In China, for example, you cannot have any other political party. You're only allowed to have one party, that is Chinese Communist Party. You cannot form any other party. That is called a one party system. Now, in one party system, there is a good part and there is a bad part. The good part about this system is that they can follow any policy that they like. I'll give you an example. So today, let's say in India, railways is going into losses. Railway does not have enough money, but the government knows that even then they cannot increase the fare, the ticket price in railways. Because if the government increases the fare, if the government increases the price of the ticket, then the people will not vote for this government and the government will fear, and then the government will lose the election. So, out of this fear, the government does not increase the fare in the railways. That is bad policy. That is bad economics as well. Because in the long run, it will harm us only. It is starting to harm us. Because railways is going into losses, you have to give a lot of money to railways from outside. In a one party system like China, for example, the government is not really concerned about whether or not you are happy with their policy or not. Doesn't matter if you're unhappy, doesn't matter what you think about the policy. If the government thinks it is the right policy, they will implement it because you don't have any other option. You don't have any other option to go ahead and choose anyone else. There's only one party available, and people will have to come to that party only. Second, there is a two party system. Now, please remember this. Many countries have a two party system. For example, US, UK. These are usually two party system. Now, please understand something. Two party system does not mean that there will be only two parties. Try and understand what I'm trying to tell you. Two party system does not mean there will only be two parties. What it means is there are two major parties or two big parties that take most of the votes. Then there are some other small parties as well, just that they don't get many votes. In UK, for example, we have the Conservative Party that is in power right now. We have the Liberal Party, Labour Party. These are the two main parties, but we also have some other small parties. In US, for example, we have two main parties, the Democrats and the Republicans. Apart from these two also, we do have other parties as well. It's not like we don't have other parties in the US, just that they get much lesser votes as compared to the others. What happened in a two party system is, two party system is a system which evolves over time. So these countries might have had multiple parties in the past, but over the years, over the decades, people usually voted for one of these two parties only rather than voting for anyone else. and that is how they evolved. So usually two party systems are a result of evolution. The interesting part is in India's own Constituent Assembly, when the constitution makers were discussing India's constitution, famously Dr. B.R. Ambedkar had said that I expect that India will also evolve into a two party system over time. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was hopeful that India will also go to the same path. India will also turn into a two party system with time over the years, but it has not happened. If, for example, let's say BJP and the Congress would have been the only two parties that got over 90% of the seats, then we would have said that India is also a two party system. But that is not true. Now, in a two party system, what happens is that people, the common people, are very well aware of what the two parties think. Both the parties have very clear ideology. Everyone knows what Democrats think, everyone knows what conservatives think. Very few people change parties from one party to the other. Whoever is a Democrat will remain a Democrat for a very long time. Whoever is a Republican will remain Republican for a very long time. People usually don't jump parties as such. Then comes countries such as India, Pakistan, even Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. Most developing countries, even countries such as Israel, have a multi-party system. Now, if you look at India, the multi-party system, India has the largest number of political parties in the world. In India, it's extremely easy to open a political party. First, because there are so many parties, as a voter, you have a lot of options. You don't like the first party, you vote for the second one. You don't like the second one, you vote for the third one, you vote for fourth, whatever you want to vote for, you can, because you have so many options available. And if you don't like any of the options, then you can open up your own political party. That is also allowed. So India has a multi-party system. Now the problems in the multi-party system is, first, the good part. The good part is many options available for the voter. And if you are not happy, then you have the freedom to open your own political party, freedom to launch new party. The bad part, however, is instability in government. Right now, for example, you see the government that has just been formed at the center. It's a coalition government. Coalition government means when multiple parties have to come together to reach the majority mark. When you are running a coalition government, when there are multiple parties required to come together, what happens is that you are dependent on small parties as well. If one of them goes back, if one of them takes away the support, then the entire government will fall down. This happens in a multi-party system because the votes are divided between so many parties, the seats are divided between so many political parties, that you cannot have any one single party claiming to be the majority party. You cannot have that situation. You will only have a situation where multiple parties have divided the votes, multiple parties have come together, and multiple parties have to ensure that they will get a small section of the small part of votes together. Now, similarly, there are political parties with different ideologies. You might have seen these words in the news. In the news, for example, you might have seen these two words time and time again: left parties and right parties. You might also have heard the word liberal parties and conservative parties. Now, there is a left wing ideology and there's a right wing ideology. Please understand this: left or right ideology, there is nothing wrong in the two. Both are fine. But if you go to the extreme, if you go to extremes, and both are bad. If you say that I have a left ideology or I have a right based ideology, right wing ideology, None of this is wrong. You can have whatever ideology that you want. But if you go to the extreme of it, then it becomes a problem. When I say extreme, what I mean to say is, let's say I believe in certain ideas. Let's take this example. Let's say I believe that everyone should get up at 5 a.m. in the morning. Fine. I can think whatever I want. I also want you to wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning. Fine, I can want that. But if you don't wake up at 5 and I start to beat you, I start hitting you, I start to fight against you because you're not getting up at 5, that becomes the extreme form. That is bad. If I just believe that everyone should get up at 5, there's no problem with that. You can believe whatever you want. Your beliefs are with you. But when you try and force this upon others, when you try and make sure that others also follow, and if they don't follow, you use violence, that becomes a problematic thing. So when you say extreme of these ideologies, extreme means that you force your ideology upon others. And if they don't agree to follow that, then you start to use force, you start to use violence. That is wrong, and this is where the problem starts. So what are left wing versus right wing? Left wing, basically, if this is center, left wing are those parties that want a change. They want devolution of power. Devolution of power means power to be given to the common man, power to be given to the laborers, power to be given to the workers. They want that old existing systems should change. That is why they are liberal in nature. Liberal means they want to have freedom, they want to have changes, etc. When it goes to the extreme part of it, means when they start demanding that we want a change no matter what, we want to take away power from the government no matter what, when they go to the extreme part, that is when they become left wing extremism. You might have heard of left wing extremism. Left wing extremism again is a situation where you follow your left based ideology to such a large extent that if your ideology is not followed by others, if someone does not support your ideology, that is left wing extremism, then you are ready to use violence against them. This is an example, or Naxalism rather is an example of this only. On the other hand, right wing means conservative. Conservative, basically, they can also be called a status quoist. I'm sure all of you would have heard this phrase status quo in Indian politics. Have you heard this phrase or not? Heard this phrase? You would have heard this, right? Status quo means maintain the present situation. Maintain the present situation, don't bring any change. For example, when there is a dispute between the two parties and they go to the court says maintain status quo. Maintain status quo means kind of, as a kid, we used to play this game, statue. What is statue? Whatever you are doing, just stay frozen, just stay right there and then. That was status quo, to maintain status quo. That is what right wing ideology is. Right wing ideology is a conservative ideology. When you say conservative, that means they don't like changes. They don't like changes. They think whatever is happening for a last few years, for last many decades, is the right thing. We should continue with that. They follow traditions. They don't want any changes in the tradition. They don't want new ideas. For example, if monarchy has been going on for a long time, if for a long time we have had the rule of a king, then we should continue doing that. Common people now will think that, oh, we are living in a democracy, people should have the real power. What is the tradition of king or queen now? We should remove king, we should remove the queen, etc. But right wing ideology says that no, whatever has been going on for a long time should continue. So their old rituals should continue, their old tradition should continue, Nothing should change. Now, if they also start to impose their ideology on others, if they also start to forcefully tell others that you have to follow ideology, and if you don't, then we will kill you, that becomes right wing extremism. The most common example of this is religious terrorism or religious fundamentalism. Religious fundamentalism or terrorism. Meaning that, for example, they believe that whatever is written in our religious books, whatever is written in our old books is all correct. We should follow that, we should keep following that without any changes. And they try to force that upon other people as well. If other people don't like it, then they are ready to use violence. That is right wing extremism. So, both these ideologies, thinking or saying that I'm a right wing person, I'm a left wing person, not wrong. You can be a right wing person, no issues with that. You can be a left wing ideologist, that is also fine. Only when you go to extreme of these two, then it becomes a problem. As long as you're not going into extreme, you believe in one ideology over the other, that is absolutely fine. Political parties have different ideologies. Now, the interesting part is that in India, it is difficult to categorize political parties into different ideologies. I'll tell you why. The reason why in India you cannot have different categories of parties into different ideologies is that in India, their ideology keeps on changing. Because of a multi party system, the political parties want to come to power no matter what. And in order to come to power, political parties keep on changing their ideology. One day they will be criticizing something, other day they will support that political party, other day they form a team with that political party. So the problem in a multi-party system is, in a multi-party system you do not have any one fixed ideology of political party. The ideology keeps on changing depending upon their motive, their intention, and the intention is just to come to power no matter what. In order to come to power, they can keep changing their ideology, and that becomes a problem. Now, one of the topics about the political parties that was in the news recently, or that usually remains in the news, is the donations of political party or how they receive donations. See, political parties, in order for their working, require a lot of money. They give huge ads in the newspapers. They hold rallies. They hold functions. They influence the voters to vote for them. They organize programs, so on and so forth. So, political parties require a lot of money. Also, political parties don't get any money from the government. So, don't think that the government gives any money to political parties. So, the question is, from where do political parties get their money? If the government is not giving them any money, but they do require money, from where do they get the money? The answer here is donation. The answer here is donation. Now, political parties mainly get money from donation. People come and donate to them. Now, the question is, first of all, who donates to political parties and why? What I mean to say is, if you ask any common man, have you donated to a political party? The answer in 99.99% cases will be no. It is almost impossible to find a common man that may have donated money to a political party. So the question is, where do the political parties get their money from? The simple answer here is they get their money or donation from usually corporates, means the big companies. It is the corporates or these big companies that donate money to the political parties. Why? The reason why you donate money or the reason why companies donate money to political parties is they hope that if this party comes to power, they hope that if this party forms a government or if it already is in the government, then this party will make policies that will be favorable to this company. So if the company, for example, donates 500 crore rupees to a political party, and next election this party comes to power, then the company hopes that in return the policies made will be favorable towards us. In return, we will get benefit of the government policies. This is how the political donations work, because common man don't really donate to political party. It is mostly always the corporates only. Now the question is, how is this donation done? For the longest time, and even today, there are question marks over donation. Many people believe that donation is a way to turn black money into legal money. Many people believe that political parties take donation from corporates give their black money or their illegal money, unaccounted money to the political parties. To change that, a few years back, the government started something called the electoral bond scheme. The electoral bond scheme was introduced by the government. Now, as you know, the Supreme Court now has removed the electoral bond scheme. The Supreme Court now has said that the electoral bond scheme is unconstitutional. Right now, the law in India is, if you want to donate to political parties, up to 2000 rupees, up to 2000 rupees you can donate in cash. Up to 2000 you can donate in cash. More than that, it cannot be cash. It used to be electoral bonds. Now that has gone away. So now we are back to over 2000 rupees. It has to be in the form of, let's say, check or draft, etc. But it is only under 2000 that you can donate to political parties in cash. More than 2000 cannot be in cash. Political parties can take donations from any person or any company other than the government companies. So please do remember, government companies cannot donate to political parties. The government companies cannot donate to political parties. Also, whatever donations a political party receives, whatever donation a party receives, if that donation is above 2000 rupees, any donation of above 2000 rupees, political parties have to report it to the Election Commission of India. All the donation above 2000, they will have to report it to the Election Commission of India. The Election Commission of India must be told about this, must be told about every donation of above 2000 rupees that the political party has received. If they don't do that, then they will not get any tax benefits. If they have to or they want to get tax benefit, they will have to report to the political parties. Now, electoral bond scheme we will not study in detail now. The reason is the Supreme Court has removed it. Supreme Court has called it unconstitutional. You might have read about this already. Electoral bond was a way for the corporates or for common people also to donate money to political parties. You had to go to State Bank of India. Some branches of State Bank of India were selling the electoral bond. You had to give money to them, and they will give you the bond in return. That bond had to be submitted to the political parties, and they will get the money. Supreme Court has called it unconstitutional. The Supreme Court, in fact, also ordered that the Election Commission of India and the SBI should declare who donated how much money to a political party. So electoral bond scheme is gone now. We are back to square one. Let's see in the coming months if the government introduces any new method of political donations or not. But since electoral bonds don't exist now, we're not going into detail of that because that is not relevant for the examination now. What did the Supreme Court say while cancelling or holding the electoral bonds unconstitutional? Number one, they said that non-disclosure of the source of funding has promoted corruption. They said that because common people don't get to know who is donating money to the political parties even today, it can lead to corruption. Also, When a big company, as I told you earlier, when a big company donates money to political parties, see, everyone expects a favor in return. When you are helping someone, you do that with the hope that they will return the favor. Even if you give some money to a beggar, even in a signal, on a signal, when you give some money to a beggar, the reason why most people will give the money to a beggar is in return they hope that the god is looking at them and the god will return the favor somehow, right? Even when you're giving money to a poor person, you're hoping that maybe the god will return the favor. So the reality is that whenever you do a favor to someone, whenever you're helping someone, you're expecting something in return. Similarly, when the corporates or when any of these individuals give big money to the political parties, they do expect something in return. This is a phrase called quid pro quo. You might have heard this phrase, or if not, then please remember this. Quid pro quo. Quid pro quo means returning a favor, something in return. That I am giving you this much money, so tomorrow you should give me this much government contract. Or I am giving you this much money, when you come to power, government policy should be formed in my favor. I should be the one who should get government projects, etc. That is the idea of quid pro quo. So the idea of quid pro quo, as Supreme Court said, is something that electoral bond would promote. Supreme Court also said that companies only donate as a business transaction, they want it benefits in return. The court said that fundamental rights of the people should not be violated. People should have the right to information. People should know which party is getting money from where. For example, in the election, when I go and decide who to vote for, I should first know which party is getting money from where. On the basis of that only, I can make an informed decision. If I know that a party that I want to vote for is getting money from a company that is embroiled in many corruption cases, I might not want to vote for that party then. So there has to be freedom of information. Apart from that, electoral bond scheme made some other changes as well. Before the electoral bond scheme was introduced, remember this. Before the electoral bond scheme was introduced, any company could only make a maximum donation of 7.5% of their profit. So before the electoral bond scheme, if a company, let's say, made a profit of 1,000 rupees, the maximum donation that they could do was 75 rupees. That was maximum, not more than that. Maximum 7.5% donation was allowed. But electoral bond scheme removed this limit. The bond scheme removed this limit. Now, a company was free to donate even 100% of its profit to the political parties. Now, you might ask, which company would do that? Which company would donate 100% or 50% of its profit to political parties? This is where corruption starts. These are again shell companies. You might have heard this phrase, shell companies. This gives to the rise of shell companies in India. What are shell companies? Shell companies are basically bogus companies that don't do any business, they don't do any work. There is only one reason of forming these companies, and that particular reason is that they can just transfer black money into white money, they can convert black into white, and they are not doing any business as such. They are just trying to save taxes or convert black money into white money. All these were reasons that the Supreme Court had suggested, because of which they said that the electoral bond scheme is unconstitutional. One other reason why most opposition parties were not happy with electoral bond scheme was that most of the money was going to only one party. Most of the money being donated through electoral bond scheme was only for one party, that was BJP. Now, understand this, it is very usual. that whichever party is in power will always get most of the donations. Because think of it again from the side of the corporates. If the corporates or any big businessman is giving donations to political party, he or she would only want to give donations to the party that is in power, right? Why would I give donation to a political party that is not even in power? They are not even running the government. If I'm giving money to a political party, I want them to make changes. I want them to bring new laws, new policies that favor me. Then obviously, I would only give money to those parties that are in power because they have the right to do that. They have the right to change the policies. If you're not even in power, why would I donate money to you? So it's very obvious that the parties who are in power will almost always get more donation than others. There's nothing wrong with that. But in this case, what was happening was the difference was huge. If you look here, BJP in financial year 2023 got 1294 crore donation. Second largest was Congress. Congress's donation through electoral bonds was only 171 crore. That highlighted the disparity. While BJP donation was close to 1300 crore, second numbers Congress was just about 15% of that, just about 171 crore. So there's a huge difference between the BJP and the other parties getting the money. So that also led to this belief from the government, from the Supreme Court also, that there's something wrong here, that maybe the people who are donating money are expecting the government to work in their favor, which is not good for the democracy. This was our first part of the class, that is political parties in India. Before I begin second part of the class, comparison of the constitution, I'll give you a couple of minutes. If you have any relevant questions to whatever we have discussed, please feel free to ask. I'll first answer those and then we'll go ahead. Sunny saying, where does the thought nation first stand? Sunny, see, the thought of nation word is an old thought since the time of the World War. It starts from fascist ideology. Nation first means basically do everything for the nation, whatever the nation requires you to do. Fatima is saying only 2000 donations allowed now. No, Fatima, only 2000 till 2000 only cash can be allowed. Over 2000 you can still give, but not in cash. 2000 rupee limit is again for cash donations. Vanshika, we just discussed why Supreme Court opposed electoral bond scheme. The reasons we just gave. These are the reasons we were discussing this. These are the reasons the Supreme Court thinks that this will force the government to give favors to others. It will lead to corruption, etc. Then Harish is saying shell companies. Harish, shell companies are companies that are just on paper. They're not doing any business. They're just registered as a company so that they can convert black money into white money. They are usually used for tax evasion purposes, for illegal means. These are companies that are not doing any business at all. They're just a board, but they'll not be doing any business. Then Kritika, national parties are those parties that fulfill certain criteria. It's a topic in Indian polity that you hear. National parties are those that fulfill certain criteria of the number of votes and the number of seats that they get. Uh, Swati Singh, Russia has which party system? Swati, Russia has a multi-party system, but it's a unique, not a unique, but it's a weird system where only one party has most of the power. The elections are not fair. So although there are other parties that do fight election, but there's only one party of Vladimir Putin that keeps on winning it. Then Manpreet's centrist ideology means when you are in between right and left, when you don't follow a lot of liberal or conservative ideology, a mix and match of the two. Devyani is saying, is a right wing, left wing also come into economics? So Devyani, the interesting part is ideologies in politics is different than economy. For example, in let's talk about the BJP. Many people would say the BJP is a right wing party. They are more of conservative in approach. But the reality is in economics, they are a liberal party, because if you follow right wing ideology in economics also, that would mean that the government companies will stay with the government only, the government companies will not be liberalized, will not be open. But in economics they are a liberal party. So again, as I said, it's very difficult to define a political party as right or left in India. It changes from time to time. Uh, okay. Rajneesh is saying if under Article 19 if a political party is formed, it must have certain reasonable restrictions. What are they? Rajneesh, the same restrictions that apply to all of the groupings that are formed: cannot promote violence, cannot break the law, you have to follow public order, so on and so forth. Then, yes, Swati, corporates still donate about 2,000 rupees, because if they can't, then the political parties won't be able to work. Guys, please ask relevant questions. Smriti is asking what how to control black money. It's not our topic of discussion. Black money is something that you read in internal security. Guys, we have just discussed how and why electoral bonds were removed by the Supreme Court, so we will not repeat that time and time again. Stephen, we have discussed right wing and left wing. Right wing means conservative, those who don't want to change. Left wing means liberal, who want to change. Fatima, elections take place in one party system. You choose people from one party only. Like, for example, let's say in India, if there are elections and you have to choose between Prime Minister Modi, Amit Shah, Rajnath Singh, Nitin Gadkari, these are the only options you have. Then it becomes a one party system where you still do choose or do have election, but you cannot choose from others, basically. Yusra, the criteria to become a national party, you will read it in Indian polity. You can search that online also. You can get that criteria. Um, Guys, don't ask. Someone has asked why don't parties concentrate on development of the country? I don't know why. Ask the parties. No, I can't tell you why they do it or why they don't do it. Swati, there is no better system or worse system. Every system or every country has their own different system. Now, guys, please understand one thing. Please understand one thing here. One problem that we have, or one mistake that we commit is we usually assume that whatever system we are following becomes the best system. Please don't assume that. For example, a lot of people, knowingly or unknowingly, write in the answer that democracy is the best form of government. Many people write this, that democracy is the best form of government. Now, I'm not saying it is or it is not, but the only thing I'm saying is just because we are following democracy, just because India is a democratic country, does not make it the best system, right? For you, it might be the best system. For someone who is living in a monarchy, they might like that system also. So it's not a competition. It's not that you can actually decide that one party system or one kind of a system is better than the other kind of a system. Similarly, you might think of left wing policy being better or right wing policy being better. You can assume whatever you want, but you cannot make a statement that this is better than the others, or this is a better ideology, this is a bad ideology, this is a good ideology. You can have your own opinion, you can have your own assumptions, but you cannot give this statement of saying that this is better and that is worse. Okay, I'll take one last question, then we'll go ahead. Shank is saying you said BJP has liberal economic policy, but privatization means moving more towards capitalism, thus right wing. No, 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 no. Privatization does not mean going towards capitalism. See, privatization basically means you are being liberal, so you're open to changing. Also, capitalism does not mean right wing. I'm not sure how you're equating the two. Right wing basically means conservative approach. Right wing basically means when you are not, or when you hold all the powers in your hands, just like it used to be earlier. Liberal policy, on the other hand, means you are giving the freedom. Whoever wants to own, whoever has the power can own it. Simple. So please, again, as I said, do not make statements in the examination, in your paper, that one is better than the other, one party system is better, or one governmental system is better. I have seen many people write that parliamentary form of government is better than presidential form of government. Please don't write that. It may be for you, you may think one is better than the other, but that does not mean that you make a statement like democracy is best, or so on and so forth. Just because we are following that in India does not mean that this is the only good system around. Anyways, let's go ahead then. Now the other part here is the comparison of the constitution. Shreyank, capital, let's say privatization. How is privatization equal to capitalism? You are not, you, how are you equating privatization to capitalism? Capitalism is an ideology wherein the people will not, or wherein only a few individuals will take over the control of everything in the economy. The government will not interfere in anything, right? That is how you say it is capitalism, that the government is not interfering in anything, the government is allowing the companies to run free-handedly. But again, privatizing or liberalizing something does not mean that the government will allow everything to be done. I'll give you an example. Let's say the government of India has sold Air India, right? That is one part of it. Now your assumption is that after selling out Air India, now government will not have any rules. Government will not ask the companies to give at least this much salary to the people. Government will not ask the companies to have at least some social security for them. Capitalism means where the government is not interfering in anything. The government is not even telling you what is a minimum pay. In India, we do have a minimum pay, we do have social security, we do have labor laws, etc. Capitalism will be the absence of everything. Capitalism would be that there cannot be any unions formed, there cannot be any minimum salary law, there cannot be any social security benefits. That is the form of capitalism that is going into slight extreme. In India, just privatizing something or selling something to a private sector does not automatically make it a capitalist economy. For example, in India, we still have many companies, or most of the companies running in the private sector, but we do not call India as a capitalist country. A capitalist country would be complete absence of government in the running of businesses. In today's world, in fact, there is no country that is truly capitalist, because the government has introduced some policies, had introduced regulations for almost every single sector. You have to follow those government regulations, you have to follow those government laws, etc., in order to be operational. So just privatizing something or just asking the private sector to come in would not really lead to capitalism. Capitalism is an extreme form of it. I hope you understand this. Clear now? All right then. So the next part that we have is comparison of the constitution. Now what do we study here? The simple idea is we will compare most of the important features of the Indian constitution with that of the other countries. Now please understand this, because we are preparing for India's examination, it is very obvious that we studied India's constitution a lot more detail. For example, when you study about fundamental rights, you study about each and every article. You read about other articles, entitled principles, fundamental duties, etc., emergency provisions, so on and so forth. For other countries, obviously, we will not go into that much detail. So you're not expected to know Constitution of America or British Constitution in so much detail. What we'll do is we'll try and compare important features of the Constitution with the other country. When I say important features, means the form of government that they follow, how is their parliament formed, who is the head of their government, how is their judiciary working, some of the important features that they have. This is what we'll be doing. Now, do we get questions from this part in the exam? Yes. So basically, every 4 to 5 years, we get one question from this. Every 4 to 5 years, we get one question from this. For example, The last question that we had from this part was 2 years ago. So 2 years ago, the question was about comparison of method of election of president of France and India. So question was very straightforward. It was to compare how election is or election for the president is held in France as compared to India. Now, in these kind of questions, if you have not read how French president is elected, then you cannot answer this question. You cannot make a guess because you have to write in detail. That is the kind of question that comes in. So you don't have to go into a lot of detail. You have to just go into the important features, not a lot of detail, and compare that as compared to India. So we'll start with the American Constitution. Out of all the constitution that we will study, for example, we'll study US, UK, France, Australia also we will study. Out of all the constitutions, we will go into the most detail of America. We'll go into more detail of America. For the others, we'll not go into that much detail. The reason is America is the one from where most questions are asked. Most questions are asked from America's constitution only. So this is the most relevant one, number one. That is why we'll go into most of detail of this. And second, because America's is the oldest written constitution in the world. Oldest written constitution in the world that still continues, and it is the one from where most of the questions are asked. So we'll go into most of the details of Americas, and the others will not go into that much detail. Now let's start with the American Constitution. It came into force in 1789. So very, very, very old constitution. If you have read world history, you would know about America's history. In case you have not read world history, let me tell you very simple, very brief what is America's history. America, just like India, was ruled by the British. So it was also ruled by the British. However, the rule was slightly different as compared to India. So how was it slightly different? Let me give you a small brief idea. Let's say this is Britain, small island. The problem with the Britain has always been its small size, its small territory. Because it has a small size and territory of its own, they have always wanted to acquire areas outside Britain. Now, if you look towards the west of Britain, there is the Atlantic Ocean, and then there's a huge continent called North America. Now, the story is that in the 17th century, in Britain, the British government thought that there are many people in our society that are unwanted. The British thought that people who are prisoners, people who are criminals, people who have not been following the government laws, etc., the British thought that one option is that we will keep them in the prison. But why to build prison in our own country? They thought that building a prison, keeping the people in the prison will not really help us. The reason is that even if we keep the people in the prison, it will just consume our resources. It is not going to help us much. So rather than that, the British had an idea. Why not send these bad people, the prisoners or the illegal people, to far off areas where they can't come back from? So British thought, why not cross the Atlantic Ocean? On the other side, there's a huge piece of land. Why not let's just settle these people there? So in the 17th century, the British started to send some people here. Now in North America at that time, very few tribal people used to live. In North America, there was only tribal population and they used to live here. So British started establishing colonies. They started establishing colonies here to send their prisoners, to send their convicts, to send unwanted people. The colonies were set up here. on this coast. There were total of 13 colonies. 13 colonies or 13 states, whatever you want to call them, were established here. And they were ruled by the British. They had their own local government kind of a thing, but they were mainly ruled by the British. The British Parliament made laws on them, they were under British control. These 13 colonies in the 18th century, 1770s, they thought that we will fight for our independence. The reason why they wanted to fight for their independence was they used to pay taxes to the British people, but they had no representation in the British Parliament. So there was a very famous slogan: "No taxation without representation." There was this famous slogan, "No taxation without representation." It was a slogan by these 13 colonies. They said that we will not pay any taxes unless there is representation in the British Parliament. So you have to give us seats in the British Parliament, only then we will pay taxes. British obviously did not agree to it. So these 13 colonies, they came together. They said that, okay, we will fight against the British. And this was called the American War of Independence. It was led by George Washington. George Washington led these 13 colonies together, and they fought against the British. They won. From the British side, there's a name that is very familiar to all of you. You would remember this person. From the British side, who was fighting? Mr. Cornwallis. The British general who was fighting was Cornwallis. The same Cornwallis who is related to India, who came to India as the Governor General, the same Cornwallis. So Cornwallis was fighting against George Washington. Cornwallis lost, he surrendered, and that is how America became independent. So that is the American history, a very small part of it. That is the American history of how America became independent. You will obviously read in a lot more detail in world history, but that's a very short form of the story. So one of the things that you have to understand from this entire story is the American story or American history is a history of how 13 states came together and they formed a country. Now, if you compare this with India, the biggest difference in India and America is America was first only states, and then it became a country because the states agreed that, okay, let's form a country. That is the US. That is why it is called United States of America. Now you know the meaning of the name also. USA is United States of America, means these 13 states decided that we will be united, we'll form a country. Then, with time, they started going inwards in the continent. Many new states were formed one by one, and they became a part of the country. That is how the country was formed. But in America, the logic is the states came first. They decided we will make a country, and that is how the country was formed. In India, that was not the case. In India, country always existed. We always had one nation, and it was then divided into different states. In India, we always had one single country, we always had a nation. The nation was then later divided into different states. In America, on the other hand, there were states which were together or which came together to form one single country. That is a big difference between the two. Please do remember this because it will help you understand the American Constitution. It will help you to compare with the Indian Constitution. Why? Because in America, the states came first, the nation of the center came later. Because of that, in America, states are more powerful than the center. Please remember this. It is opposite of India. In India, center government is obviously more powerful than the state governments. The reason again is that we had country first and then the states came on later. Whoever will come first will always keep all the powers with himself or herself. That is the obvious logic. Wherever you have or whichever entity will come first, either the state or the country, whichever entity comes first, will retain all the powers. In America, because the states came first, they made the constitution in such a way that the states remain or retain most of the power. In India, it is the opposite. Now, in that context, let's come back again. So, in America, constitution came into being in 1789. One interesting feature was that America does not have just one constitution. So in America, they have a constitution for the central government and they have constitution for each individual state. They had a constitution of the central government, the one that we are discussing. Then every state has their own constitution as well. So in America, there are actually total of 51 constitutions, one of the center government, and 50 states have their 50 constitutions. One other idea that you have to understand here is when the Americans were making their constitution, when this American constitution was being made, it's a very, very, very short constitution, just a few pages, very short constitution. The reason being, it was decided that why not let the states have the freedom to make their own detailed constitution. So every state has made their own detailed constitution. That is why at the center we have a very, very short constitution, very few pages, because the crux or the main information is mainly at the state government level, at the state constitution level. Some of the salient features include, as I said, number one, very brief constitution, very, very, very brief. So, as I said, the reason is that American states or American 13 states that came together that first made the constitution did not want to spend a lot of time in there. They thought that whatever we are doing or just make a very short kind of a guideline that these are the important articles. Let's not go into detail of it because we will allow the states to make their own constitution, and that is why you will see that the American constitution is very, very little, very small pages. Uh, for those, I don't know how many of you know this or not, but for those who know this or those who don't know this, do you know how many of articles are there in the American Constitution? How many articles does it have? Any idea? Don't Google it. Let's see if you can tell me. How many articles does the American Constitution have? Okay. 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 A lot of some of you are correct, some of you are not. American Constitution only has 7 articles. It only has 7 articles. Compare that with India. How many articles do we have? So they have only 7 articles in the entire American Constitution. They have made 27 amendments so far. They have made 27 amendments so far. They have only 7 articles. The respective states have their own constitution, as I said, so they have many more articles. They have their own laws, they have their own constitution, but at the center government level, their constitution has only 7 articles, only 27 amendments. Now, it has a brief constitution, very brief, as you can see. Devsmita, yes, their polity syllabus must be easy, but only for the center government. Imagine a polity student remembering the constitution of the state as well. So, in that way, not that easy. They have a written constitution. There are some countries with unwritten constitution as well. UK does not have a written constitution. Israel does not have any written constitution. New Zealand also example of an unwritten constitution. So there are some countries with unwritten constitution, but most of them have a written constitution as such, like India also. As we discussed, separate constitution was center in all the states and a very rigid constitution. Now, rigid or flexible depends upon how easy or difficult is it to make changes. When you say rigid constitution, what do you mean to say? It is difficult to amend. It's difficult to amend, difficult to make any changes. That is a rigid constitution. You cannot make changes very easily. It's a difficult process. And I'll show you basically the difficult process just a bit later, how to make changes. Like India, they also have separation of powers. When you say separation of power, that means powers separated between executive, legislative, and judiciary. They have the Bill of Rights, which is their version of fundamental rights. Just like we have fundamental rights, they have something called the Bill of Rights. They have the supremacy of constitution, just like India means the rule of the law will be followed. The supreme law is a constitution. The constitution tells what the government can or cannot do. Systems of checks and balances, just like India. For example, in India also, judges can be removed by the action of the parliament. President of India can be impeached by the parliament. Members of parliament can be disqualified on the orders of the president. So that is how the checks and balances are in India. Similar is the case of checks and balances in the US. Now, one of the interesting features is it is an indestructible union of indestructible state. Now, what does it mean? See, in India, if you look at Article number 2, for example, Article 2 or the Article 3 of the Indian Constitution, they talk about formation of the new states. In India, the parliament has the power to reorganize states. We have seen so many new states coming up. We have seen old states names being changed or their areas being changed. How Telangana came into being, Uttarakhand, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Haryana, Gujarat. All of these came into being when originally the states were divided. Andhra came into being. However, in America, that is not allowed. In America, the states cannot be reorganized. The center government cannot reorganize the state, whatever states had been formed, because again, in America, the states have a lot more power than the center. The center cannot impose its own will on the states will decide. In India's case, the states can be reorganized in multiple ways. So, what do you say about India? How do you define India? India will be indestructible union of destructible states. India can be defined as indestructible union of destructible states. Again, when I say destructible states, what we mean to say is the states can be reorganized. They have been reorganized from time to time. They have been reorganized in various ways. There have been new authorities formed. There have been states that have changed their area, that have changed their name also. In America, that is not true. Kennedy, new states can be formed in USA, but the state governments decide that. They change the constitution, not the center government. Center government cannot change it. It's not the center government, it is the state government that can decide if they want to change their name, if they want to change the boundary, if they want to change something else. Center government cannot do that. Apart from other things, in America, there is judicial supremacy amongst the other organs. Now, this is unique. In India, we don't have that. In India, we always say that there is a balance of power. Balance of power in India. In America, there is judicial supremacy. Now, when we say judicial supremacy, what we mean to say is if you look at the judicial review powers, If you look at judicial review powers, in the US, the judicial review power of the American Supreme Court is much wider. In India, the judicial review power of the Supreme Court is only used when they pass a law that is against the Constitution. If the Supreme Court thinks that a part of the Constitution, the part of the law that has been passed, is against the Constitution, then the Supreme Court can strike it down. In America, that is not true. In America, even apart from this, even apart from, let's say, even apart from being against the Constitution, the American Supreme Court can strike down the law even if they think that the law has wrong intentions. If they think that the law has wrong intentions, the law will have a wrong impact on the people. In India, the Supreme Court does not look into the impact, does not look into the intentions as such. In India, the Supreme Court only looks into whether or not the law is in line with the Constitution or not. If it is against that Constitution, it is struck down in India. If it is not, then it is not struck down. In America, it is much, much, much wider. That is why judiciary in America seems to have an upper arm as compared to the others. America follows a federal form of government. Federal form of government means division of power between center and the state. It is not the same as India because America, in many ways, is called as a truly federal country. Many people call America truly federal country. When we say truly federal, what we mean to say is powers are divided in such a manner that the states have a lot more power. In India, as we have seen, that is not true. In India, the center government can impose emergency without the state asking for it or without the states having the power to say no. In India, the parliament has the final right to even divide the states. Even if the state says no, we don't want to be divided, the parliament does not have to listen to it. In America, on the other hand, states have been given a lot more power. So it's a truly federal country in the sense that they have divided powers to make the states powerful. They have a presidential form of government. Unlike India, India has a parliamentary model. I'm sure you have read this in Indian polity. There are two main democratic forms of governments around the world: parliamentary and presidential. Parliamentary is what you see in India. Means people choose their members of parliament only. From amongst the members of parliament, there are certain people who get to become ministers. So you choose your MPs. Amongst the MPs, some of them become ministers. In order to be a minister, you must be a member of the parliament. The other problem is, or the other feature is, whoever forms the government is dependent on majority of the Lok Sabha. Government is dependent on majority of lower house or majority in the lower house, right? If tomorrow the government loses majority in the lower house, the government will fall down, as simple as that. That is how parliamentary form of government works. You choose your members of the parliament. From them, some of them become ministers. Whichever party has a majority in the lower house, that party forms a government. Presidential form is different, followed in the US. People choose their president directly. Ministers are not members of parliament. So, for example, when American citizens choose their president, the president then decides who does he want as a ministers. In America, ministers are called secretaries. For example, whoever becomes the American president can appoint their daughter, their son, son-in-law, daughter-in-law, wife, whoever they want as the minister, and they do that. That is how the presidential form of government works. Then government is not dependent on majority in the parliament. The reason is that election for the president is held separately and election for the parliament is held separately in the US. So, for example, it might happen that in the president election, it might happen in the president election, president or the candidate of the Democratic Party might win. Let's say the Democratic president or the Democratic Party, their candidate wins the president election. And it might happen in the parliament election, Republicans have the majority. That is possible. It happens very often. When Barack Obama was the president, Barack Obama was from Democrat Party. He became the president. But at his time, when elections of parliament were held, it was the Republicans that got the majority. It is like saying that in India, Prime Minister is Mr. Modi, but the Congress has the majority in the House, something like that. It happens in the US because there are different elections for the president, they are held separately, and then there are separate elections that are held for the parliament. That is, these are some of the interesting and important differences between parliamentary and the presidential form of government. America has dual citizenship. As an American, you are a citizen of the state and citizen of the center as well, a citizen of the country as well. In India, you don't have citizenship of the state. As you know, in India, you are a resident of a state, but citizen of the country. That is a big difference. In India, you are the state's resident, but nation's citizen. In America, you are citizen of state also, and you're citizen of the center as well. Now, in America, their parliament is called the Congress. Their parliament is called the Congress. They also have two houses, so it is also bicameral. Bicameral means two houses. Lower house is House of Representatives. Upper house is called the Senate. Lower house, the seats are divided in the states on the basis of population. Meaning that the larger the population of the state, the more is the number of seats that they get. Now understand this idea. When American Constitution was being made, there was a big debate, and that debate was big state versus small state debate. America had a big state versus small state debate, meaning that the smaller states did not want that they should get seats on the basis of their population. Think of it in India as example like Goa and Uttar Pradesh fighting. Uttar Pradesh would obviously want that we should be divided the number of seats on the basis of population, right? UP has the highest population, so they want that the seats that should be divided should be on the basis of population only. Goa, on the other hand, does not want that, would not want that because Goa has a smaller population. So, what would Goa want? Goa would want that the seats should be equally divided. Every state should get equal number of seats so that they are not left behind. That will be a fight in India also. But in India, in both the houses of the parliament, Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, in India, in both the houses, the states are given seats on the basis of population only. So, in both the houses, Lok Sabha or the Rajya Sabha, UP, because of its highest population, will get the highest number of seats. Lower the population, will get lower number of seats. In America, what they did was they had a compromise. The compromise formula was in the lower house, called the House of Representatives. They will get seats, or the states will get seats on the basis of population. But in the upper house, that is the Senate, each state will get two seats only. Doesn't matter what your population is. Each state will get two seats only. So total 100 seats. 50 states, 100 seats. So that is their compromise formula. Rather than giving states seats on the basis of population, both of the houses, in one house they have given on the basis of population, in another house they have given fixed number of seats, that is two seats for each. And that is how the elections are held. Now, one other interesting feature is just like in India, in Rajya Sabha, who is the chairperson? In Rajya Sabha, the vice president is the chairperson. This is the feature we took from America. In America also, it has the same feature. Their vice president is the chairman of the Senate. One other very interesting thing that you have to understand here is usually around the world, the lower house of the parliament is more powerful than the upper house. In India also, Lok Sabha has more powers than Rajya Sabha in terms of money bill, in terms of removing the government, no confidence motion, etc. In India also, in many other countries, most countries that have two houses, they have made two houses in such a way that the lower house is more powerful than the upper house. The reason is lower house is directly elected by the people. It's considered to be more of a representation of democracy. America is an exception. America is an exception. Why? Because in America, upper house is much more powerful than the lower house. Upper house, that is the Senate, more powerful than lower house. That is the House of Representatives. It is an exceptional thing because around the world that is not the case. How powerful is the Senate? Very, very, very powerful. For example, whatever high level appointments are done by the American president, all the high level appointments have to be first confirmed by the Senate. Only after Senate confirmation would they be appointed. I'll give you an example. Do you know just a few months back, America did not have its ambassador in India? For a very long time, for many months, America had no ambassador in India, no representative in India. Why? Because the American Senate was just not passing confirming it. How it happens in America is the president will decide who he wants to send as the ambassador in other countries, but Senate has to confirm it. Only when the Senate confirms that they can send, otherwise they will not be able to send. That is how it works. Apart from that, Senate has to confirm all the international treaties before they come into being. If America has to be a part of international treaties, Senate has to first confirm it. Senate is the one that takes the final decision on president impeachment. That is why Senate in America, that is the upper house, is considered to be more powerful as compared to the lower house. Because they can do a lot of these things that the lower house cannot. It is very, very, very rare. Again, the idea is that if you have two houses in most of the country, lower house will always be more powerful. But in America, that is not true. Coming to the president of the US. Now, US presidential elections are watched all around the world. Very interesting elections, very different in how they are actually conducted. First, in order to become an American president, you have to be a natural born citizen of America. Now, what do you mean by this? Like in India, there are multiple ways to get citizenship of India. Citizenship by birth, by registration, naturalization, many ways in which you can get citizenship in India. In America also, you can get citizenship in many ways. However, in America, you can only become a president if you're a citizen by birth. If you get citizenship by any other method, you cannot fight American elections. You have to be citizen by birth. You have to be 35 years of age and you have to be living in the US for 14 years. So even if you are a US citizen by birth, but you're living somewhere outside, that will not count. You have to live in US for at least 14 years. Only then you will be eligible to fight elections. Another interesting part is the elections of president and vice president are held simultaneously, meaning that if you look at president election, president and vice president run in a pair. For example, if Donald Trump wants to fight election, he will choose a partner. He will choose a partner. It is in America, it is called running mate, who wants to become the vice president. So when people vote in the election, they are not just voting for Donald Trump alone. They are voting for this combination. If Donald Trump wins, he becomes a president and his partner becomes a vice president. If Donald Trump loses, then the partner also loses. That is how the VP and president elections are simultaneous. So they basically go ahead together. Whoever wins, it is both who will win, or it will be neither. You have to ensure that both of these are running together. These are called running mates. These are called running mates. Now, vice president position is extremely important in the US. Just like in India, if something happens to a president, vice president will take over. Vice president is the head of the upper house as well. Vice president has many other jobs that are being given to him or her. Now comes the president election. Now, American president election, in order to understand this election, you can compare this with kind of Indian prime minister election. Compare that with Indian prime minister. That will make your job much easier. In America, the total number of constituencies are 538. Means just like if you have our Lok Sabha election that was held just recently. In India, what happens in the Lok Sabha? You have total number of 543 constituencies. So you divide the entire country into 543 parts. Voting happens. Whoever wins the majority wins the election, right? Similarly, in America, the number of constituencies are 538. So the entire country is divided into 538 constituencies, and then people will vote. So if you want to vote for Democrats, you vote for them. You vote for Republicans, you vote for them. In order to become the president, you need to get 270 constituencies. In order to become the president, you need to get 270 constituencies. 270 is the majority mark. Whoever gets 270 constituencies will become the American president. Please understand this. Now, over here, there are a few things that you have to understand about the American elections. Because there are only two main parties, one is a Democrat, one is a Republican. Because there are only two main political parties, one of them will get the majority. One of them will get the majority. But what if they don't get majority? For example, let's say there is a small party apart from these two as well. Let's say Democrat Party They won, let's say, 260 constituencies. Republicans, let's say they won 250 constituencies. And there's a small party called the Green Party. They won 28 constituencies. Now what happens? Because none of them got 270, 270 is a majority mark. Now what happens? In case this happens, in case we have no candidate or no party getting to 270, then House of Representatives will decide the president. House of Representatives will decide the president. Has it ever happened in American history? Yes, it has happened once. Many years ago, it did happen once. It has happened once and the House of Representative will decide. Now, the interesting part is House of Representative can decide from any of these three. If they want, they can even choose this party as well. There is no compulsion on the House of Representatives. House of Representatives will decide in case no one gets a majority who will become the president. They can even decide from the smallest party, no one can stop them. But this is extremely rare. It usually does not happen because, as I said, America is mostly a two-party system. Mostly there are two political parties only that will get most of the seats. So one of them usually does get a majority without any issue. And when one of the two gets a majority, they will get to have their president and the vice president. But on the other hand, just in case, just in case none of them gets a majority, the House of Representatives decide. Deshmukh is saying so ministers may not be part of parliament. No, Deshmukh, the ministers must not be a part of parliament in America. Not may, but must. In America, the ministers must not be a part of parliament. The ministers are separate and the parliamentarians are separate. The American president chooses who does he want as the ministers. President removal is also interesting. The removal of American president is because of the reason of treason. Treason basically means going against the country, bribery, or other high crimes. Other high crimes, there is no definition of it. There is no definition of what do you mean by other high crimes. Now, over here, please understand the word impeachment is used very differently in America as compared to India. When, if in India, for example, if I say in India that the president has been impeached, what would you think? You would think the president is removed from the post, right? In India, when we say impeachment, we say removal. That the president has been in America, that is not true. In America, it's a two-step process. In America, the first step is impeachment. Impeachment is the first step, but impeachment is not removal. Second step is removal. Like in America, Donald Trump, when he was a president, he was impeached. Similarly, Bill Clinton, when he was a president, he was also impeached. In America, impeachment is not removal. Impeachment is only the first step. Second step is removal. Impeachment happens in the lower house. Impeachment happens in the lower house. If the House of Representatives pass the bill, that means the president has been impeached. But that does not have an impact on the working of the president. The main difference is in the Senate. The second step is a trial in the Senate. When why do we say trial? They say trial because Supreme Court judges will also come to decide the case. In the Senate, if there is two-third majority, two-third of total membership, who vote against the president, then the president will be removed. Again, first step is impeachment. Impeachment is when the lower house passes the resolution by special majority saying that yes, we want to remove him. Impeachment is not equal to removal. Second step is removal when the same proposal will go to the Senate. Senate will then decide what to do in this case. It requires an approval of at least two-third majority, whatever Senate says. So far in the history of US, no American president has been removed. As I told you, American presidents have been impeached. American presidents have been impeached in the past. Donald Trump, Bill Clinton have been impeached. Impeached means that they have been criticized, but they have not been removed. There is one American president who has resigned by himself. There is only one president who has resigned in America, that is Richard Nixon. He was involved in a scandal called the Watergate scandal. He was forced to resign, but there has not been any removal so far. None of the American presidents have been removed. Some of them have died when they were presidents and the vice president took over, but none of them have been removed by this process. Give me a couple of minutes, guys. I'll just fill up my water bottle once again. Just a couple of minutes, I'll be back from here. All right then. Simran, as I said, president and vice president are running mates. So when people vote, people don't just vote for a president. President chooses a partner with him. And again, when people vote, they vote for the team, the two of them together. So if the president wins, then his partner automatically becomes a vice president. So there are simultaneous elections. There are no separate elections for the vice president as such. Now, the lawmaking process in America is almost the same as India. The working of the parliament is almost the same as India. Just like in India, the bill is introduced, they usually send the bill to the committee discusses the bill, they give it the final shape, and then the voting happens. It is almost the same as India, nothing much that is different. Just a few factors which are different here as compared to India. For example, veto in America for the American president is slightly different as compared to India. Now, first, if you look at the veto thing, they have something called a qualified veto. In India, in Indian polity, when you read about vetoes, you know there's pocket veto, there's absolute veto, there's suspensive veto. Talk about the suspensive veto. Now, in India, when the president gets a bill from the parliament, the president has an option to send the bill back. They can send the bill back to the parliament, asking the parliament to make certain changes. This is called suspensive veto. In America, also, the president can send the bill back. However, in America, when the president sends the bill back, that bill now has to be passed by a higher majority. Means, as compared to last time, more people should support the bill. Only then the president will sign. This is called qualified veto. Again, I'll repeat, it's similar to India's suspensive veto. The difference is in suspensive veto in case of India, when the president sends a bill back, it has to be passed by same majority and the president second time will have to sign on it. In America, on the other hand, if the president sends a bill back, the bill now has to be passed by a higher majority, means more people should support it as compared to others. This is called qualified veto. The second part is pocket veto. One other big difference between Indian and American presidents is in India, president has no time limit to sign the bill. President has no time limit to sign the bill. In America, the president has a 10-day time limit to sign the bill. Meena, I will tell you how to manage time. The best way to manage time is when you're in the class, focus on the class. That is the best way to manage the time. In the class, if you keep asking questions, how to read the newspaper, how to write current affairs, how to read, how to make notes, can I pass BPSC? That is not the best way to manage time. So if your question is how can the time be managed? The answer is focus on the class when the class is going on, and then you can ask these questions after the class ends. That is how you manage time. Okay. So as I said, Indian and American presidents, both of them have to sign the bills. The difference is in India, president has no time limit to sign the bill, while in president of America has a 10-day time limit. So if the American president does not sign on the bill on 10 days, what happens? If in the first 10 days the president does not sign on the bill, then what happens? On the 11th day, the bill is passed automatically. The bill is passed automatically if the president does not sign. So president has a 10-day time limit only. Wow, however, there's a very interesting exception here. And that exception is in America, when the parliament session ends, end of a parliament session means the end of the bill. Means when a new session starts, a new bill has to be introduced. In India, that is not true. Like in India, we have 3 sessions in a year. We have the budget session, monsoon session, winter session. These three sessions, if one of the bill is introduced, if the session ends and the bill does not pass, in the next session it continues from where it was left off. Just because a session has ended in India, we don't change the bill or remove the bill. In America, on the other hand, when a session of the parliament ends, that means the bill has also ended. That means now a new bill has to be introduced when the new session begins. In India, that is not true. This is something that the President of America uses in his pocket veto power. The American president, now imagine if today, 1st of July, American president gets a bill to sign. American president knows he has only 10 days to sign the bill, otherwise the bill will be passed automatically. But if the president knows that the session of the parliament will end on the 7th of July, then if he does not sign on the bill by 7th of July, it's only 7 days, bill will automatically go away because the session of the parliament has ended. Did you understand this? I'll repeat. American president only gets a 10-day time period to sign on the bill. Otherwise, 11th day, the bill will be passed automatically. However, the president also knows that in case a session of the parliament has come to an end, the bill will automatically be removed and it will start new from the next session. Now, if the president gets to sign the bill or if the president gets a bill today and the president knows that less than 10 days are remaining for the parliament session to end, if he knows just 7 days later the parliament session will end automatically, even if I do not sign on the bill will go away. In that case, the American president can use the veto power. Pocket veto can only be applied when less than 10 days are remaining in the session, because after 10 days the bill will automatically be passed. Only when less than 10 days are remaining, we can have a situation where the president does not sign on the bill and the parliament session ends and the bill will automatically go away. One other interesting part is the joint sitting. In India, also, we have a joint sitting of the parliament. However, there's a big difference. In India, when we have a joint sitting of the parliament, all the members of Lok Sabha, all the members of Rajya Sabha, they sit together. This is called the joint sitting. Now, the problem in Indian joint sitting is when Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha sit together. Lok Sabha has much larger numbers, so automatically whatever Lok Sabha wants will be passed, right? In India, if you have a joint sitting, when all the members of the two houses are sitting together, whatever Lok Sabha wants will happen because Lok Sabha has much higher numbers. So in America, they have not done this. In America, their joint sitting is different. In America, when a joint sitting is called, equal number of members from Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, mean House of Representative and the Senate, equal number of members will come and attend. Let's say in the joint sitting, let's assume 20 members will come from lower house, so 20 only will come from the upper house. Or they can be 50-50, they can be 25-25, depending upon whatever they decide. But in the American Parliament joint sitting, they ensure that they have equal number of members from both the houses and not all the members. Because otherwise, lower house will get a lot more powers. Now, two other important features. One very interesting, and not just interesting, one very weird feature of American Parliament is called filibuster. Filibuster is a system that we have seen in Senate. Now, what do you mean by this? Please understand this. Filibuster is a system that we see in American Senate. Now, in American Senate is criticized in America for being extremely, extremely useless. and I'm not saying harsh words, American people themselves, they say that our Senate is useless, our Senate does not do anything, our Senate is not doing their job. Why? Because American Senate has a system called the filibuster. Now, what do you mean by this? Let's try and understand. In simple terms, filibuster is a rule that means if a member of the Senate is speaking, then he or she cannot be stopped unless they themselves stop. I'll repeat. Filibuster is a system which says the any member of Senate who is speaking cannot be stopped forcefully. They will stop by themselves when they want to. Now, what exactly is this rule and how is it used? Let me tell you. Many years back, when the elections were held, apart from the two main parties, Democrats and the Republicans, there used to be some members of small parties as well, one or two members only of small parties. These one or two members never got enough time to speak in the parliament. These one or two members were just not allowed to speak. They did not have any support in the parliament as such. So it was thought that we should allow the other members also to speak. How do we allow that? By making a rule that whoever is standing and speaking, they will not be stopped. They will stop by themselves if they want to. But you cannot stop them. This is called a filibuster. Now, how is it misused? It is misused as, let's take an example. Let's say in the Senate, Democrats want to introduce a law. Okay? They want to introduce a bill. On the other hand, the Republicans don't want the bill to be passed. Republicans are against the law or against the bill. So, what will happen? Republicans know this rule of filibuster. Republican member will stand up and he will start to speak, and he will just not stop throughout the entire day. He will randomly start speaking anything. Means there are people who just bring storybooks in the American parliament. Do you know that? And they just start reading the storybook one page after other page after other page, just because they don't want to stop. Because they know the rule of filibuster, they know they can't be stopped. So they randomly start saying something the entire day. They keep on speaking and speaking and speaking, just because they don't want a bill to be introduced on the opposite side. This is called a filibuster. Filibuster means randomly speaking anything that you want because you know that you can't be stopped, to prevent the other side from doing anything that they want, from preventing the other side from passing a law, preventing the other side from introducing a bill. You can prevent them from all this thing. How? Just by speaking. There are, if you watch videos on YouTube, there are people who have bought storybooks to the parliament. They just stand up on the mic, keep on reading stories. Other people go out just because they want to eat up all the time, the entire day, just because they don't want the opposition to speak. This weird rule is called a filibuster. This is something that happens in the Senate. And that is why the American people hate the Senate. Oderani, no. Filibuster is in Senate, not in the joint setting. That is why the American people say that our Senate is the most useless house. It does not do anything. And it is so weird. You know what? People, and you can see videos on YouTube, people will just stand up on the mic and they'll start saying random things. And they'll say, do you know once upon a time there was a king? The king used to love a girl. The girl was a parrot, and I don't know what weird random things. And they keep on saying for hours and hours and hours till the time the day ends. Next day they again continue. Why? Because they also know that when the session comes to an end, the bill will automatically go away. That is what we discussed, right? That when the session comes to an end, the bill will automatically go away. So they deploy this technique not to allow any business to be conducted, not to allow any law to be passed. This is called filibuster. Now, someone has asked a question, why don't they change it? I don't know why they don't change it. See, again, on the outside, it may look to us like, why don't they change it? In India also, we think about a lot of laws. Why do politicians not change it? Why don't they have this law, that law? But understand this from politicians' point of view. Why would they change something that they can misuse? Or why would they change something that they can use to their advantage? Maybe all the political parties, all the politicians want to use this to their advantage someday or the other. So no one wants to change it. We assume from outside that, oh, they want to work, they want to pass the law, so why don't they change it? Maybe they don't just want to pass the law, maybe they just don't want to work. That can also be the case, right? So this is one of the most frustrating things that happens. That is why when we criticize our parliament, when we criticize that, oh, our parliament is not productive enough, think about the American parliament. Think about an adult, grown up 60-year-old reading a children's book all throughout the day just because he does not want someone else to get up and speak. So this is something which is weird, but again, this is a reality in the American Parliament that still continues. The last and the important thing about American Parliament or American system is the judiciary system. Now, American judicial system is different as compared to India in a lot of ways. One, they have a dual setup. Now, dual setup means they have a separate state judiciary and they have a separate federal judiciary. When we say federal, that means union judiciary, union government. Now, please don't compare this with India. Please don't think, oh, in India also we have Supreme Court and High Court. But no, that is not true. What it means is, in the state judiciary, these courts will hear state laws matter. Any law of the state that you have broken, the state judiciary will hear this. In fact, state have their own state supreme courts. Every state has their own supreme court. So they have a separate system entirely because they have their own state constitution. So when you break the constitution, when you break the law of the state, you go to state judiciary, state court, state supreme court, etc. When you break a central government law, when you break a central government law, then you come to central government of federal court. You have a US Supreme Court here, which is the all US Supreme Court. So again, this is the difference between the two. In India, that is not true. In India, doesn't matter which law you break. You can break a panchayat law, you can break a municipality rule, you can break a high court, supreme or central government, state government law, does not matter. You have to go to the same process. Same court will look into your matter. Same district court, same high court, same supreme court will hear your matter. Does not matter which law you broke in India, state law or the central law. But in the US, that is not true. If you break a state government law, then you go to state judiciary. They will hear the case. It will go up to state supreme court. If you break a central government law, then you go to central judiciary, and the central government will then hear your case up till the central supreme court. One other interesting feature that puts American judiciary different as compared to India is that in America, judges have no retirement age. Judges have no retirement age. Now, this is very interesting. In India, as you know, Supreme Court judges have a 65-year retirement age. High Court judges have 62-year retirement age. In America, that is not true. In America, they can hold office during good behavior until they are sound mentally, physically. If they are able to work properly, they will hold the court. So in America, you will see so many judges who are in their 80s. There are even judges who are in their 90s in America. So what happens in America is basically after they reach 75 years of age, after 75 years, the government does conduct their mental examination time and time again. After every few years, every few months, uh, mental examination, mental checks are conducted on the judges. But apart from that, you don't force the judges to retire in America just because of age. The judge can retire himself or herself. If the judge wants, they can retire themselves. But that does not really mean that they will be retired by a certain age. Now, there are two ways to look at this rule. One is it is good because, for example, look at a country like India, we have so many cases pending, over 4 crore cases pending, and we have lack of judges because we are forcing the judges to retire. After 65, we are forcing the judge to retire to Supreme Court, which should not be the case. But in America, what happens in this case is, number one, they allow the judges to continue. But the other way to look at this is, think of a situation. And this did happen when Donald Trump was the American president. Now listen to this. Donald Trump was the American president at his time. So, by the way, American Supreme Court has 9 judges. Now, when Donald Trump was the president at his time, he appointed 3 judges because two of them died. One of them had resigned by himself. So Donald Trump appointed 3 judges. So one of the judges that he appointed, Donald Trump, when he appointed a judge, he was 45 years old. One of the judge he was appointed when he was 45 years old. Now imagine him. He became the judge in the American Supreme Court when he was 45 years old. And he can work till the end of life as a Supreme Court judge. Imagine if this person lives a long life. He would be an American Supreme Court judge for 40 years or even 50 years. He will still remain an American Supreme Court judge and he will have a tenure of 40 to 50 years. Can you even imagine? Imagine a Supreme Court judge having a tenure of 40, 50 years and still not being removed. Now, what is the problem with that? On one hand, you might say this is good, the person has experience. But the other side of the story is, when you have such a long tenure, when you know that you cannot be removed easily, the judges can be removed in the same manner as in India. The parliament can conduct an inquiry, all that can happen. But the judges know there is no retirement age. So when the judges know that they're in that post for such a long time and they cannot be forced to retire, that also increases the chances of corruption. That also ensures that the corruption can creep in. Now, one other point about American judiciary or American Supreme Court, especially, is, see, in America, there are two main parties, Democrats and the Republicans. And the division between them is very clear. Means everyone in America knows what is the ideology of Democrat, what is the ideology of Republican. For example, Democrats are considered to be liberals. Republicans are considered to be conservative. And it is very open. For example, they support migration or they support immigration. Means people coming in from other countries, living in America, they support it. They oppose any outsiders. They oppose any migrants. Democrats are considered to be minority friendly. Republicans are considered to be opposed to minorities. And this is all out very open. This is nothing that is hidden. So now what happens is, when an American president is from the Republican Party, like Donald Trump is from the Republican Party, when an American president is Republican and he has appointed some judges, like Donald Trump, as I told you, has appointed 3 Supreme Court judges. Any Republican president will appoint only those judges who are actually like the Republican Party only. Means Donald Trump, for example, because he's a Republican president, he will appoint judges who are conservative in nature. He will appoint judges who oppose the migrants. He will appoint judges who are opposed to minorities. It is very, very, very open. On the other hand, when a liberal person or when a democratic president becomes the president, when a democratic candidate becomes a president, like Joe Biden is from Democrats, Obama was from the Democrats. When a Democrat becomes a president, if they have to appoint a judge, they will appoint people who are liberal in nature, who support migrants, who support minority, etc. It's very, very, very open. For example, when Donald Trump appointed his judges, what happened was in the American Supreme Court, out of the 9 judges, majority of them, at least 5 of them, became conservative. That is the time that they abolished abortion. They said abortion will not be allowed in the US because their policy is they're conservative in nature. Conservative basically means they do not support abortion, they do not support they do not support the choice of basically letting go of the child. So again, that is how the American Supreme Court is. American judiciary is divided on party lines. Whoever, whichever was the president who appointed them, their ideology will be followed by those judges, even in their judgment, and that is how the American Supreme Court works. Let's take a break, guys. Let's be back at 8:30, and we'll resume with the British Constitution. Thank you. Hi guys, sorry you got stuck somewhere. So this was our main features of the American Constitution. We'll now move on to the British Constitution. Uh, as I told you earlier, out of all the constitutions that we'll be discussing today, we'll be going into the details of the American Constitution the most. The others, we don't have to go into a lot more detail because most of the questions that are asked are from the American Constitution and its comparison with the Indian Constitution and its main features. If you look at the British Constitution is very, very similar to India, or I should say the otherwise. Indian Constitution is very similar to British. A lot of our features, the Constitution that we have, are taken from the British Constitution itself. The kind of parliamentary system we have, the appointment of the prime minister, the working of the two houses, the ministers, etc., president's power not being that much. Most of that has been taken from the British system only. Now, one of the most interesting features of the British Constitution is that it is not a written constitution, it is unwritten. Now, please do not confuse unwritten with not having a constitution at all. They do have a constitution, just that it is not written in nature. What we mean to say is they don't have a specific book that they call as a constitution. Rather, what happens in this case is that they have their own laws, the common laws that the parliament passes. They have their own rituals and customs that have been going on, whatever the judiciary says. So it's a compilation of all these things at different places that they consider as their constitution. So they do have a constitution, but they don't have a written book as such that they call as a constitution. There have been different logics and there have been different laws that the parliament passes. Also, please don't confuse this. When we say they have an unwritten constitution, does not mean that the parliament does not work. The parliament works in the same manner as India. They also pass the laws. The laws are separate, the constitution is separate. Just that we have a separate book called the Constitution of India. They don't have a separate book like that, which will be the Constitution of Britain. They have a parliamentary form of government just like India, the same process, the same manner in which it works. They have a constitutional monarchy. So, one, they have a monarchy, so they have a king. But with king and queen, in historical perspective, when you say a country has a king or a country has a queen, you assume that the king and the queen would have a lot of powers. Because the king and the queen or monarchy would mean that the person has all the powers to take the decision, the person decides on his or her own. But when you say it's a constitutional monarchy, what you mean to say is that the king's powers are limited by the constitution. The king's powers are limited by the constitution. In other words, the king does not have unlimited powers. What will be the powers of the king are basically derived from the constitution, what the king can do or what the king cannot do. The British king is very similar to that of Indian president these days. When we say India's president, what we mean to say is they don't have any discretionary powers. Most of their decisions are based on the advice given by the Council of Ministers. Not just this, the advice given by the Council of Ministers is binding on the British king, just like it is on the Indian president. While they are still the head of the state, it is mostly a ceremonial position now. It's mostly a position where you cannot really do anything on your own. You can only do whatever the government, the council minister has asked you to do. Similar is the case in India as well. Also, they have a unitary constitution. Now, what do you mean by this? It is the opposite of a federal country. Now, if you look at some countries around the world which are not very big in size, Britain, France, these are countries that are not very big in size. So, what they have done is they have not divided the country into any states or provinces. Like in India, we have states, provinces. In America, they have states. In Britain, there are no states or provinces. There is just one single country. So there's no concept of division of power between the center and the state. There is only one single entity, that is the center. And there's no state government as such. And that is what we mean by unitary constitution. They have cities, and the cities have mayors, but there's no state government or provincial government as such. They have a flexible constitution because it is unwritten in nature. So it can be altered, it can be amended, just like passing a normal law. So whenever normal law is passed, you can assume that it is actually an amendment to the constitution itself. So there's nothing that is there's no special procedure as such to amend the constitution. It has parliamentary supremacy. Now, this is very interesting. The British Parliament is extremely powerful. In fact, there's a very famous historical quote. The quote is, the British Parliament can do everything except turn man into a woman and women into a man. Now, with science, they can do that also these days. But this is the historical quote. The British Parliament is so powerful, it can do everything except turn man into a woman and women into a man. What does it mean? What it means to say is that in Britain, there is no judicial review. For those of you who don't know, who have not read Indian polity, judicial review means when the Indian Parliament passes a law, you can challenge that law in the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court believes that this law is against the Constitution, if this law is not valid, then they can strike down the law, they can cancel the law. That is what happens in India. This is called as judicial review, the power of the judiciary to review the laws. In Britain, there is nothing like judicial review. Means in Britain, the British Supreme Court cannot strike down any law of the British Parliament. If the British Parliament has passed a law, it is a final law, it cannot be struck down. That means that amongst the three organs of the government, judiciary, executive, and the parliament, in Britain there is a clear superiority of the parliament. Because again, the parliament's actions, the laws of the parliament, cannot be struck down by the court as they can be in India. British Parliament also is bicameral in nature. We took the bicameral nature of our parliament from there itself. They also have two houses. Lower house, the House of Commons. Upper house is the House of Lords. Lower house is almost exactly the same as Lok Sabha. Upper house is different. British upper house is very, very, very weak. When we say very weak, that means they do not really have a lot of powers. They can't really pass laws, etc. They can't really stop the laws of the lower house. And it's very interesting how the members are. See, there are two types of members: Lord Spiritual and Lord Temporal. Now, what does it mean? First, Lord Spiritual. Lord Spiritual basically means they are representatives of the church. So Britain has an official religion. British official religion is called Protestantism. The British official religion is called Protestantism. It's a form of Christianity only. It's a version of Christianity. Their beliefs are slightly different. So this is their official religion. Now they have some official churches. There are some churches that are recognized by the government that have been given a lot of power. So those churches have representation in their upper house. Those churches decide who will they send as representatives in the upper house. They are called Lord Spiritual. So Lord Spiritual are seats that are reserved for the church, that are reserved for the representatives of the church. They are the ones who come in and fill these seats. Then there are Lord Temporal. Lord Temporal, who exactly are they? These are common people. Now, in Britain, apart from the famous royal family, there's one royal family of Britain from where you have the kings and the queen, etc. Apart from that royal family, also in the past, there were some other small royal families. So the main royal family that we have is not the only royal family. Apart from that, also there are some here and there small royals who have not retained their property, etc. Now, So those who were royals or who were relatives of this royal family, they are also given certain seats in the upper house. There are two types of seats: life peers and hereditary peers. Life peers are basically those who are members for their entire life, means they have no tenure. Hereditary peer mean after their life also, their seat is passed on in their family hereditary. Their seat is passed on hereditary in their family. So as you can see in the upper house, they don't really have elections as such. In the upper house, that is called the House of Lords in Britain, they don't really have a lot of elections. They have representatives from the church, they have representatives from different royal families. Some of them are members for entire life, some of them are members or seats which are basically passed on the family only hereditary. Because of which the upper house in Britain is not taken very seriously. You will never see a lot of news coverage of the upper house. You will only see news of the lower house in Britain, of what House of Commons is doing, how are they conducting their meetings, etc. One other thing that is unique in Britain is in India, the ministers or the prime minister can be from any house of the parliament. In India, the ministers or even the prime minister can be from Lok Sabha or can be from Rajya Sabha. Either of them would work. In Britain, the prime minister must be from the lower house. In Britain, the prime minister must be from House of Commons. That is in Britain. In India, that is not true. Like Dr. Manmohan Singh, when he was a prime minister, he was a Rajya Sabha member for 10 years from Assam. Indira Gandhi also was a Rajya Sabha member for some time. HD Devegowda, Rajya Sabha member for some time. So there have been multiple Indian prime ministers who have been members of the Rajya Sabha, that is the upper house. In Britain, however, if you have to become the prime minister, you have to be a member of the lower house. Ministers can be from any house, but the prime minister has to be from the lower house itself. Most of the other features in Britain are very similar to that of India. Coming to another interesting constitution, that is France. Now, the French constitution in itself is very interesting. It's interesting in the sense that the French constitution is a result of a lot of experimentation. When you read world history, you read about the French Revolution. When the French Revolution took place, they removed their king, they removed the queen, they removed monarchy, and they made a new constitution. But France is a country that keeps on experimenting with their constitution. Sometimes they make a constitution that is the monarchy, sometimes then they make it a republic, sometimes they make it a mix and match of it, sometimes they say five people together will rule the country. So they have made a lot of constitutions in the past. In fact, on average, France has had a new constitution every 13 years. Every 13 years, they have had a new constitution on average. The present constitution that France is running, it was in 1958. This is the present constitution. So if you actually see, the present French constitution is actually even newer as compared to India. If you see this, even Indian constitution is older as compared to France, because the present French constitution only came into being in 1958. It is called as a Fifth Republic. The name Fifth Republic means it is a fifth republican constitution. Fifth such constitution that says that France will be a republic. Apart from this, there have been other constitutions that say that France will be a monarchy. So for monarchy, there is a separate constitution. But this is the fifth republic, means the fifth republican constitution. That is why it's called the Fifth Republic. Because France has been experimenting a lot with its constitution, there are some features that are unique to France only, which are not seen in any other country. For example, number one, it is a semi-presidential form of government, means it is neither parliamentary nor presidential. It's a mixture of the two. How? So, like the parliamentary system, they have direct election for president, they have direct election for president, but then after that, they have a prime minister also. President then chooses the prime minister and other ministers from the parliament. President chooses prime minister and other ministers from parliament, whichever side is in majority. So basically, you can assume that it's kind of like Indian system, with the opposite being true. Means in India, prime minister has all the powers, not the president. But in France, president has all the powers because people have directly elected the president of France. He then chooses the prime minister and the ministers from the lower house wherever there is a majority. Their parliament has limited powers. Now, what does it mean? It is said in any democracy around the world, out of all the democracies, the French president has the most powers. The French president has most powers out of all the democracies, if you see. How? Because in France, what happens is the French president has been given the power to make rules and policies on most of the matters. Parliament, on the other hand, can actually only make policies or laws on a few things. As I said again, I'll repeat, Parliament can only make laws on a few things in France. They have limited powers. Most of the powers in France are actually with the president of France. It is a French president who decides most of the things, who can make rules, who can make regulations on a lot of things. And that is why, in the entire democratic world, it is said that French president is the most powerful president. Just like Britain, they also have a unitary constitution which is not federal in nature, because they also, just like Britain, they don't have state, they don't have provinces, they have country divided into different cities. Cities have their own mayors. But another interesting feature of French constitution is the amendment procedure. Now, French constitution can be amended in two ways. So there are two ways in which it can be amended. First, 60% majority in both houses of parliament. 60% majority in both houses of parliament. Now, let's assume that this is not happening. The 60% majority is not being achieved, but the president of France still wants the amendment. The French president wants an amendment should happen. So, what can he do? The second option is the president can call for a referendum. Referendum means asking the common people in France to come out and vote. And the common people will decide whether they want the amendment or not. If the common people in the referendum say yes, we want the amendment, then amendment will be done. These are the two ways in which the amendment can be done. Either the parliament can do that. For the parliament to do that, they would require a 60% majority in both houses of the parliament. For the president, if the president is not satisfied, president thinks that the parliament is not doing this, because see, just like the US, in France also, since the president election is separate and the parliament election is separate, there may be a probability that the president can be from one party and some other party can be in the majority in the parliament. It may happen. So in that case, president may want something, but the parliament may not do that. In US also, that is a problem. The US president can be from some other party, parliament may have some other party in majority. So in the US also, it might happen that the US president wants a certain law to be passed, but the parliament is just not passing it. In France also, the French president may want a certain law to be passed, but they're just not passing it. So what happens? In this case, the French president can ask for a referendum from the people. They can be referendum if they want, they can go ahead with that, and they can go ahead and make the law. That is how the French president works. Now, one other thing that we have to understand is the French president election. French president election process is one of the simplest in the world, and this process is followed in multiple other countries like Sweden, Turkey. Most of them have the same kind of process. It's very, very, very easy. So it's a two-stage process usually. So first stage is basically whoever fulfills the criteria can come and vote or can come and fight the election. First stage is each candidate basically gets votes. There can be any number of candidates. Each candidate's votes are counted. They're direct elections. People can come and vote for whoever they want. The rule is only rule is to win, you require 50% votes. Simple. Now, in the first stage, let's say there are 5 candidates or 10 candidates or how many candidates there are, doesn't really matter. Direct elections are held. If one of them got 50% votes, the election is over, that person becomes the president. Simple. If one of them gets 50% votes, then it's fine. On the other hand, if no candidate gets 50% votes, then what happens? If no candidate gets 50% votes, then the second stage is conducted. In the second stage, there are only top two candidates from the first stage. So top two candidates from first stage again fight election. People can now only vote between these two, and now because there are only two candidates, one of them will get 50%. So now in the second stage, the candidate with 50% plus votes win the election. This is the simplest process for French presidential election. It is the process that is followed in multiple countries around the world. As I told you, Turkey follows the same process, Sweden, many other countries follow the same process for president election. It's pretty simple. All the eligible candidates can fight. People can just come and vote. Whoever they want to vote for, they can. And then, on the other hand, they can go ahead and the top two candidates come and fight the election in the next day. In the next day, since there are only two, they will get the winner. That is how the French elections are. Emmanuel Macron is a French president, very famous, very powerful person. He was in India for the Republic Day parade also this year. If you remember, he was the one who was our chief guest at that time. Next is the Australian Constitution that we will begin tomorrow. Tomorrow is also the last class for governance. We have the Australian Constitution, and apart from that, the last class that we have is about the role of civil services in a democracy. We'll be discussing about the role of civil servants, how do they work, what are the reforms required in civil services, what is it that the government is trying to change in civil services. We'll be discussing about the Karm Yogi system, how does a UPSC work, the role of UPSC. These are the things that we'll be discussing in the last class, that is tomorrow. Pooja, no, I don't have any idea. Lakshmi, supremacy of constitution means that the rule of the constitution will be followed. Gayatri Singh, what France learned from Indian Parliament? Gayatri, I don't know if they learned something. It's not necessary that they had to learn something from us, right? Sakshi, semi-presidential means a mix of parliamentary and presidential. Like in parliamentary system, their ministers are members of the parliament. But like presidential system, their president is directly elected. So that is what happens. Uh, Anjali, no, not more. How can more than one members get more than 50% of votes? No, Anita, North and South America do not have same history. South American history is very different. Anyways, thank you so much for watching in. I'll see you tomorrow, 6 a.m. for your next class. That is your last class of governance. Do stay tuned. The SME is still here. You can keep asking questions for a few minutes. The class will be live and the SME will answer your question. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Jai Hind.